Well, organizers of the pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Toronto, they're providing an update on the status of negotiations with the school. Let's go live to King's College Circle.
With the aim of achieving a resolution through dialogue. I would like to begin our letter by acknowledging that over the last 4 weeks, we have seen an increasingly horrific escalation in Israel's 7th-month-long genocidal siege on Gaza. We have literally seen Palestinians gasping for their last breaths, trying to survive Israel's constant bombardment in Rafah, where bombs have now been raining down on tent cities for weeks, and where images of Palestinian babies getting burned alive have become painfully commonplace. This is the genocide that the University of Toronto profits off of and invests in. Over the last 248 days, we have borne witness to the death of 38,000 Palestinians, with so many more missing under the rubble. Of the many meetings and 20-plus hours we have spent negotiating with the U of T administration, President Gertler has been present for 0 of those meetings and 0 of those hours. And to be frank, President Gertler trying to win a blue ribbon for the amount of time his team has spent negotiating with us is pathetic, especially when you consider the Palestinian students here at this encampment and across our campus are having to watch their families starve to death or otherwise be killed off by the Israeli war machine. President Gertler framed his letter under the guise of engaging in dialogue with the encampment, but he himself has yet to engage in any form of dialogue at all, as he has not spoken to or met with any of the students at this encampment since we began on May 2nd, instead sending proxies with no decision-making power in his place. It is truly baffling that we have been here at this encampment for the past 40 days, demanding divestment, disclosure, and cutting ties since day one, and met with President Gertler a grand total of 0 times. How can there be any dialogue when there's no dialogue actually occurring? And not only is there no real dialogue, the university is actively seeking a court order to give themselves moral cover to call the police on their students, faculty, and staff for simply demanding an end to the University of Toronto's complicity in this genocide. Let me repeat that. The University of Toronto is actively seeking a court order to allow them to call the police on their own students. How can they possibly be good faith negotiations when one party to the negotiations must deal with the constant threat of police violence? These are no way, shape, or form negotiations that are happening in good faith. These negotiations are severely power imbalanced. President Gertler wishes you to believe it is us, the students, who are being unreasonable, when in fact it is this administration, the University of Toronto, and President Gertler that are not only being unreasonable but deplorable for continuing to fund weapons and bombs and the murder of Palestinians. In his letter, President Gertler claimed that the university values, and I quote, neutrality on issues of scholarly debate, and that, quote, the university's role is not to choose sides. But how is it neutral to invest in genocide? How is it neutral? The University of Toronto is not neutral. It has chosen a side. It has chosen to fund and support genocide. Today, here at U of T, students will once again walk across the stage and accept their diplomas. Many of these students will be wearing keffiyehs and holding banners calling for disclosure, for divestment, and an end to U of T's complicity in this genocide. And yet, every time a student holds a banner as they walk across the stage, the cameras cut to the crowd. Why? Is it because they are ashamed? Ashamed for their own students for putting what they have learned into practice and standing with the Palestinian people and demanding divestment? Or is it because they are ashamed that their narrative of us being outside agitators becomes harder and harder to maintain? I myself am graduating later this month, and yet there is no cause for me to celebrate. All I can think about are the thousands of students in Gaza who are just like me, who should be graduating, but are not, because their universities have been flattened by Israeli bombs bought and paid for by the University of Toronto.
My name is Sarah, S-A-R-A, Rasikh, R-A-S-I-K-H. I am a graduate student at U of T, and I am a spokesperson for the encampment. I want to begin by making it very clear. Divestment is neutrality, and neutrality is the bare minimum. Right now, U of T has not taken a neutral stance. They are actively investing in weapons manufacturing companies that serve the interests of the Israeli state. Investments that contribute to the ongoing genocide and violence against Palestinians in Palestine. Still, in his letter yesterday, President Gertler stated that the U of T administration is firmly committed to the principle of neutrality on issues of scholarly debate. He then proceeded to refer to the ongoing genocide in Gaza as a war between Israel and Hamas. How can UFT administration reduce this genocide to a conflict or to a war when there is no equal footing? How can President Gertler equate the colonizer and the colonized? As Walter Rodney writes, by what standard of morality can the violence used by a slave to break his chains be considered the same as the violence of a slave master? President Gertler, I hope you pay attention to these words. First of all, the ongoing genocide is not a topic of scholarly debate. It is being live streamed on our phones. Your Palestinian students, your Palestinian staff, and your Palestinian faculty have lost hundreds upon hundreds of family members and friends as a result of this genocide. The ICJ has labeled the situation in Palestine as a plausible genocide, which is the highest level before the final determination that a genocide has occurred, which effectively happens after the fact. Not only does President Gertler mischaracterize the encampment, but he also mischaracterizes the situation on the ground in Palestine. To call the genocide a war between Israel and Hamas is inaccurate. To be very clear, the situation at hand is a genocide against the Palestinian people. Next, in his letter, President Gertler writes, the university's role is not to choose sides.
We've been listening to organizers of the pro-Palestinian encampment at the UFT provide an update on the status of negotiations with the school, saying that they are disappointed with President Gertler because he has not been present for any meetings or negotiations, instead sending proxies with no power. This is 40 days into their encampment there. Again, this is amid a UFT request for a court order to have the encampment removed. That hearing, or rather those hearings, are scheduled for later this month.